Veronica, do you want to just do a quick introduction of your background and just what you've been up to the last few years?
Yeah, so when I kind of met Lexi and joined the leopard community, I was at Visa. I had been at Visa at that time for about 2 years, and I was working on kind of the debit side of things, transition more into front end, doing work on their design system team. But I had wanted to go to a startup because I felt like at a big company like Visa, you just don't have as much impact and you really don't learn as quickly as at a startup because you're just working on a smaller slice of the pie. And there's a lot of things that a company like Visa has to do, like for example, with vendor onboarding, you can't really learn new frameworks and tools as quickly because a company like Visa, if they bring on a new vendor, it's going to be a 2 to 3 year long process to onboard this vendor. So I had wanted to go to an earlier stage startup because of that. And then I went to a company called Sunnyside as their growth engineer. I had never done growth engineering before, but that's kind of what you learn at a startup is you kind of pick everything up. And I think it really teaches you that you can basically learn anything. Like it's not as bad as it seems, all these new things. Sunnyside, when I was there, I did a lot of growth hacking, kind of more front end work. And then they did a round of layoffs because they were having trouble raising the next round. And then I was part of the second wave of layoffs. And then I went to my current company is called Astral, but it used to be called Telly. They used to be in the crypto space, the Web3 space, trying to kind of build like creator tools for like artists and musicians and different creative types. And then the crypto market crashed. And they kind of were like not seeing the signal needed. Like they weren't going to get to product market fit with that original product. And so they fully pivoted into generative AI and currently, and then we rebranded to Astral. Astral is building basically this kind of like automated marketing machine tool thing. I need to get better at explaining my company, but basically we partner with different experts and we ingest their content and we have like an embed that lives on their site and we're kind of like a companion to a lot of their content. So we give like AI generated content out of it, like summaries, highlights, whatever. We have AI powered search, things like that. So that's kind of what Astra's doing now. And I didn't know anything about generative AI before we did the pivot. So I think and no one on the team really knew anything. So the pivot was a learning moment for everyone. Like you just learn. You just that's like the main thing that I took away from that is like, and I think I think people at Astra are very supportive. So we all just kind of supported each other on like experiential learning and seeing where the product and what we could build with kind of this really cool new tech that was coming out. But yeah, that's been me the past few years.
Wait, tell us more. I want to go before we go into the AI stuff, just what it's like to be at a company that's pivoting, because I think that's a really big fear for a lot of people in the Leopard network is like, what is this? And like, what can I expect? And like, what did it feel like? Just anything you remember or think about. This is helpful for people.
It's most definitely very like you don't know what the end goal is. Because like when we pivoted, we didn't know like what generative AI product are you going to build? But I feel like that's also just startup life in general. Like you kind of keep building until you find the thing that hits. So it's not like you're ever like, I have one idea and this is the only idea I'll ever pursue. So I think there is most definitely a level of like if you're the type of person where you love to just have 4 months of work that's planned out and not going to change, I wouldn't say like early stage startup is going to work out, or even I think later stage startups is that it's sometimes you don't really see that level of planning. The early days was very experiential because it was kind of like we all as a team were brainstorming and then able to contribute and come up with ideas that we thought would be effective. And then like we would kind of just like divide up what we thought were the top ideas and each engineer would go and explore it themselves. So kind of the AI search, it's basically what we call a RAG pipeline. So we kind of turn all the content into embeddings and then we we upload those embeddings into a vector database, and every time we ask OpenAI or whatever model you're using something, we pull in some of those embeddings to give the answer more context. That pipeline I had built in those early experiential days. And for the longest time, one of our like staging databases was named like Veronica GPT-4 LLM, like like some bad name because it was from my our days of experimenting, and then that service we're using doesn't let us rename these databases very easily. So yeah, I think it's a lot of uncertainty in a certain way, but I think if you're at the right company, they're very supportive of that journey, and you honestly learn so much. So like it's like almost time on at work to do like side project work a little bit is what it feels like, because you're just working on all these cool things that you feel like you're like, whatever pops in my brain, and if I can pitch it, I can work on it.
Any parts of the pivot experience that were better than you expected or worse?
I most definitely think probably I had a lot of trepidation going in, being like, can I build this? Like, I don't know what a RAG pipeline is. I don't know anything about generative AI. And then you kind of quickly learn that a lot of your computer science fundamentals or whatever software engineering work you've done really applies, because it's like, oh, wait, this is just an API call, or you're just kind of streaming data back from a model that's generating something, that's generating an answer for you. So I think in that sense, it was very like empowering to learn that I could do that, and that I could learn these new skill sets. The not fun part of pivoting is the uncertainty and the risk, because it's hard to ask product and like the business leaders. It's like, well, what's the plan? Because we're all kind of exploring together. And I think we had an offsite when we were kind of in flux, and that offsite was my company is remote, so that offsite was really helpful, because I think just the synergy of the entire company being in the same room, and then all of us being able to brainstorm and really define what that roadmap for the next 2 to 3 months looks like and what success looks like. I think that was really very helpful. But I can't see a pivot being very successful if the company is not very like open-minded, experiential, and supportive of all that. Like if it's very top down, I don't see that being a very successful. It would be very hard unless your founder is some sort of genius.
Totally. In terms of the roadmap and like, I want to see if I can get this question well said. So you've worked on like Web 2, right? Or mobile apps or web products, and now working on an AI product. How is the roadmap different? Like from a almost not just like a, well, now we're building AI, but like what should people expect interviewing with these AI companies, or like to seem aware and on top of it of what a roadmap might look like?
Yeah, I think
Try your
I'm trying to
best.
think, because like I'm trying to think how much of a roadmap we have. we have like our roadmaps aren't that long, because I think with AI, like what you see, we're kind of
Yeah,
trying to
you
still
said
find
2
product
months,
market fit,
right?
right?
Right. Like what does the 2-month sprint look like?
Mm-hmm. I think in the initial days, the biggest thing, and this is I think a thing across all AI companies, is that it's really hard to validate your results, because hallucination is a really big issue. Hallucination is actually a little bit easier to track, because hallucination is usually just wrong, and you're kind of able to
Can you
plan
explain
for that.
what that is in case people don't know?
Yeah. So basically, because part of our product relies on like AI powered search, we're kind of giving like, we're saying like, we have a system where we have ingested a lot of the content library of someone's work, and that pulls in every time someone asks a question, we pull in maybe the top 8 sources that are relevant to what they're asking, and we are like OpenAI or whatever model you're using, we're like, here's top 8 sources, here's the question, answer it. But OpenAI could totally choose to just like make something up and answer something wrong, and we call that hallucination. So that's something that's really hard to plan for, because I don't control OpenAI's model. I don't even know if OpenAI controls their model. Like it's kind of a black box, and your OpenAI takes in like 1 trillion inputs. So that's something that's you have to, especially if you're working like with certain fields, like I would say like with medicine, you cannot have hallucination. That would be a really big deal. Or like anything healthcare or like anything like government really, like stuff like that. So I can see generative AI being kind of a slower to adopt in those fields. And then another thing alongside hallucination that's a really big issue is conflation, where they say something that sounds mostly right, but there's something in there where they're maybe making it out to be a bigger deal than it seems, or it's just a little bit off. And that's a lot harder to spot, especially because like for my company, we're working with different experts, meaning I don't have the expertise of maybe a dating coach we're working with. I don't know what he would say. So it's almost like, how do you test for these cases when you're not that person? And so I would say the early roadmap, you really focus on accuracy. And I think another big thing with the AI roadmap is you want it to be like a little bit like magic. Like I was like talking to Hex they're like a kind of business intelligence tool, like data visualization tool, and they have an AI layer on top of that. And the engineering manager at Hex was saying that with AI tools, you really need it to feel magical, like something just works, or you just get the exact visualization you want. You just get the exact answer you want. And it needs to be really seamless and frictionless. And so I think that's a big thing for a lot of AI companies is like, you don't, no one wants to like be like, okay, let me upload like all these answers and all these extras to context. It's like, no, I just want to ask my question and get the right answer back. And it should be frictionless.
There's
I
so
don't know
much
if that
you can
answers
talk
your
about.
question.
No, you did, but there were just more questions, right? Like as you were going about the founding engineer stuff. So I almost want to go back to that a little bit more, and then we'll go down this AI road. But that was like super helpful. The first question was just, can you give some more context on your role as a founding engineer, just like what that looks like day to day?
It was pretty different across the two companies. So I would say that at Sunnyside, because that work was growth, and growth tends to be very fast paced and like week to week changes a lot because it just depends on the growth metrics they're getting back. So like you can't really, with growth, it's a bit harder to plan too far out because like you're running a lot of like A/B tests, a lot of experiments, and it really depends on the outcomes of those experiments you're running. I would also say Sunnyside, when I joined, was a seed stage startup, and they just weren't as structured. They didn't have like an engineering manager. It was just more like other senior engineers, and I at the time was kind of more like a junior engineer almost. So it was like it is very autonomous. I think founding engineering work is like I didn't really have like a manager that I could go to be like, I don't know how to solve this problem, or can I get your 2 cents on something? It's like I kind of did that with the staff engineer that we had on hire, but I also knew he kind of had his own work to do. So it is very much like you should try to unblock yourself as much as possible. Like it should be a balance, right? Like it's like if I ask him something and it takes him 5 minutes to give me a solution, then I should try to ask him those type of things. But also be cognizant of like how much am I asking, how much am I getting out of causing him to come out of flow. So I think like founding engineer work, just in general, you have to be very autonomous. You have to kind of be able to get like, here's an initiative, or here's like something that a feature that needs to be done, and how can you break it down from start to finish. And I think like that, those were skill sets I learned more at my current company, because my current company is a Series A company. So even from seed to Series A, I saw that difference, because we have a head of engineering. So that provides a lot more structure and process. And they were a lot better about planning out tasks. Like at Sunnyside, it just was kind of like the Wild West almost. Like it was like, okay, like can you build this? And it's like I don't think I even wrote out tickets necessarily. I just like built it. So there's kind of different levels of
When you say ticket,
chaos.
sorry, what do you mean by ticket? Like spec?
Like yeah, like I wasn't even writing out specs necessarily, depending on the size of the work, which is kind of like not a great thing, right? Because you're not tracking the work you're doing, and you're not tracking your contributions. So I think like if I went to Sunnyside and it was still like that, I would be asking for more process.
I see. There's
Because I
another
think it makes you more efficient too.
Totally. And I think that that's sort of the question line that the chat's getting into. There's a couple more questions. One's more about, a couple more. The questions I just want to like read off because there's a couple good ones about being in this like founding engineering environment. But one of the reasons I want to do, not just, there's so much we could cover in this chat that I'm like, oh, I gotta make use of the time. But founding engineering is like mysterious to our network and people are worried. And I would say you were worried the first time you did it, and like look at you now, right? And so I almost want everybody to take a growth mindset from it and be like, you're like, yeah, you need to be autonomous, but at the same time you learned how to do all of this. So there's a way it can be learned. You don't have to go in and be perfectly capable of doing everything off the bat. But the question, there was a question that said, do you have any suggestions on how to be effective at those learning experiments and process in those fast moving early stage startup culture? And then the second part is, what would you say are good ways to find out if those companies are actually wanting to support the experimental culture or if they're just moving fast without direction? Nice question.
Yeah, I think for the second part at least, my current company, we just have a very open culture and we also have retros. And I think retros are like a really great time to bring up concerns about direction. Like us as the engineering team, like there were points in our company where we felt like we just didn't have enough direction and we weren't doing enough prioritization. We call it ruthless prioritization because you kind of have to do that at an early stage startup. And we brought that feedback to the business side. So I think part of it is like being willing to speak up because like when you're at an early stage startup, the company is not very big. So it's like 10 people, right? So you kind of know everyone pretty well. So I think like really kind of building the team's trust in yourself, or you're like kind of speaking out about the right things, you're kind of pushing process forward in the right way, and being tactical about that. I think that's really important to kind of get that buy-in where it's like, where they're also like including you in those conversations and you're kind of learning, is this the right direction? Do they value my opinion? Do I have a say here? Because I think different than a later stage startup, early stage startup, you get a voice because it's such a small company and you should use that. I think that for the learning stuff, I think people learn in different ways. For me, I just learn by doing. And so there's a level of like, I would read documentation, but part of me also just like will build a bad POC and then improve it. Because that's how I learn. Like I can only read so much documentation. I also like, at my company, we use a Copilot, like OpenAI's Copilot. It's very helpful for coding. Because like, for example, today I worked on I had to do some database migrations and they were kind of noodly, like it dealt with like deleting data, which is always a little bit like risky. And I wouldn't say I'm like a savant at PostgreSQL, like it's not really my area of expertise, but kind of like I think Copilot's very helpful because if you can lay out your thought process of this is what I want to achieve, they can help you write kind of that boilerplate code. And then you can be like, oh, this is how you do it. Because I wasn't as familiar with some of the functions that is in this language potentially. So I think that also has just been really helpful for me to learn faster.
There was another question that was sort of in that vein, which was like, how do you measure your experiments or quantify them if there's no standards and definitions?
Like my growth experiments or just like in general?
They said like proving to the founders and coworkers that I'm working on something worth exploring.
For me, it was a lot of like, we did a lot of Loom videos because we're remote. So you kind of time box things. So you're like, okay, I have a goal of like spiking this and maybe it's a 3-pointer, give me 2 days. And then I kind of report out the results of that and what I learned. So I think I usually report like, this is what I learned. So a lot of times just the learning is so important because like, I think one time we looked into kind of SMS integration for like, what if you can SMS your expert? And I learned that it's terrible. SMS is so hard to integrate with. There's a lot of legalities around it. You have to like register a month ahead. And so like just that, right? Like that tells you, okay, like we should only pursue SMS if it's like going to be what we think is a very, very valuable channel. So I think you kind of have to have the sense of gauging like, just like from that. It's like, and also a lot of times it's like the founders have to have that sense too, right? You're like, I'm reporting my findings. Here's the good, here's the bad. Like, how do you think this integrates into the larger roadmap? So I don't even necessarily think as an engineer, you necessarily need to think about how it integrates into the product roadmap, because that's product and ops and business doing that. But I think you need to be able to effectively be like, this is how much work it's going to be if we pursue this. And this is what I learned from it. And this was really easy to build, or this was a super annoying to build. This will be really easy for the team to pick up. So you kind of, you need to answer those engineering specific questions.
So we have like 5 minutes. I really probably should have done 45. We can like run over like a little bit, tiny bit. But basically there's a question asking about your RAG implementation and did you use an existing framework or rollover? But before you answer that, my question that I didn't get to yet was this like full stack AI versus ML. The person who asked that happens to be an ML engineer. So if there's any way we can cover both of those before we end, that would be
okay.
great.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I can go a little over, so it's fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So wait, which question should I answer first?
Let's do the like being an ML person or like versus more of this full stack work that you're doing, and then let's get into that RAG question.
It kind of depends on the direction your company goes. I did a little bit of for ML fundamentals. I'm not an ML engineer. I like fully admit that. I think I could pick up a lot of ML concepts because I'm working so close to it. But since my company didn't really move in the direction where we need to fine tune and train our own models, that's not skill sets I picked up. And I think really that's what ML engineering is doing. I'm working more a layer above that, where I'm kind of, you have to understand the concept. So I think there's a lot of like especially like, so we work with OpenAI and we work with Pinecone, which is a vector DB, and like a lot of the services you work with will have great documentation on just how to ramp up because it's such a new field and they need to support it. Like OpenAI has a lot of like cookbooks, they call it, I think, where they just like walk you through, here's how to build your RAG pipeline, here's how you test for hallucinations, like really common use cases. So even if you're just looking to get into AI related work on the side, like I think those are really helpful to walk through. And I most definitely used a version of their code in whatever our existing code base is and edited it. I think that AI work is more like AI full stack work is really more still just pure software engineering. Like you're making a lot of API calls. You kind of have to understand vector databases and embeddings if you're doing that type of work, but they're really just numerical representations of kind of like the content you've ingested, and that allows you to compare similarity. So you kind of basic understanding of like data science and some of those concepts, which I kind of had from school. So I was lucky in that way. But I also don't think it's that hard to pick up. I think another thing with AI full stack work that's interesting is I think the front end work isn't defined. So like right now it's very chatbot interface focused. I don't know if a chatbot's the best UI. So kind of like that stuff is a little bit in flux and that's a little bit interesting. And there's also some things that's like, oh, you really have to work with like streaming the response back because models can take a long time to answer. And so kind of learning how to do that. And what do you do if the answer they give just totally sucks and you don't want to show it? So like some of that more noodly integration stuff. But I don't think you're really doing a ton of, you don't really need to know how to like train a model or stuff like that unless you move more into the ML space. Someone told me basically an AI engineer, you either go from a full stack engineer that just has an AI expertise, or you're a data science that learns some software engineering. So I think it's kind of like a mishmash of all those things.
There are a bunch of really good questions like down at the bottom that one person added. If you want to just almost like order them, like answer on the ones that make most sense to you, just rapid fire. They're like,
okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. How grueling are the on-calls? Not terrible. I think my company's pretty conscious. We basically do a week shift 24/7. And then we rotate between the engineers. But if you're building a good product, you shouldn't have that many 911s. I'm kidding. But yeah, it hasn't been that bad. I mean, if there's a fire at 2 a.m. and the site's down, I think it also depends on your company culture. Like my company culture is very much like, okay, you get pinged at 3 a.m. for an on-call. is this a fire? Like, we need to fix this now. I need to stay up 4 hours to fix this. Or is this more like I can post a status message that there's an outage on OpenAI side and it'll come back and go back to bed. So there's different, you do different types of triaging. And I think when it's 3 a.m., it's more understandable. If you don't fix it ASAP, you can kind of assess what the type of problem is. And then, yeah, I think Sunnyside was similar to in the on-call schedule. We just rotate among engineers. Code reviews. I find at large companies, sometimes the code reviews can focus more on stylistic things, like did you write this in this right syntax, and are you following like the code guidelines? Like I know Google is very strong on stuff like that, where they have like, because like, their code base is so large, they really need to manage and organize it in a certain way. So you really have to follow those style guidelines a lot more strictly. I think the code reviews at an earlier stage company is more functional and more about maintainability. It's like, did we write this in the most efficient way? Did we consider edge cases that we might have missed? So stuff like that. And then we also wrote out kind of code review principles. So if that's something that you as a founding engineer, you could also bring that up to do that. So you know what to look for in a code review. And one thing my company does in code reviews that I really like is to always give a compliment, because code reviews can be brutal and can make people feel bad. So we always are like, we appreciate the work no matter what. What do you think the interviews for these? Usually I think they're looking for someone who's autonomous and can break down work on their own and is a self-starter. And a lot of times I think they're looking for people who can also contribute business ideas. I think when you're in an early stage startup, it's hard to be like, I'm just a software engineer level 2, and this is my job description, and that's all I'm going to do. I think you kind of have to move beyond that a little bit and be able to really contribute and speak up and I think that's someone that will be an effective founding engineer, because they're kind of looking for a thought leader on the engineering side. Did I miss anything? Any comments on how front-end engineers can get into AI? How can we be relevant in the space as front-end engineers?
We've been talking about a lot, not just in here, actually.
Sorry, what was that?
This has been a big question in the front-end channels.
I mean, I would say probably side projects. It depends on if you want to stay fully front end, because ultimately to test against whatever you're building, you would need to be able to make some sort of API call, right, to whatever model you're working on. And it depends on like the level of AI. So if you're looking to switch into becoming an ML engineer, that's very different than just working on AI applications. One thing is that my company, because we weren't AI engineers before, we actually, our entire stack is in TypeScript. And if you're a front-end engineer, that's like really easy to pick up. And we work in Next.js 13, which has server and client-side components, but because it's server-side rendering, the kind of line between like what's front-end and what's back-end is kind of a lot more, it's not as clearly delineated as before. So we purposefully chose to build out our AI pipeline in TypeScript because we wanted type safety and we didn't really want to go to Python. So there are most definitely, like, I think if you're a front-end engineer, you could probably spin up a Next.js project, look at some of the OpenAI cookbooks, call the API, see what type of answer you get back, and like put it into some front-end interface. And that could be like a really quick project just to see if you even like this type of work and the type of interfaces you're working with. So yeah, I mean, there's most definitely like TypeScript options out there if you don't want to learn Python.
I just threw my last questions. I think you mostly answered it, but just in case if there's anything else that comes to mind from those two, which is just that for engineers that want to get into AI, what should they prepare for or learn in their free time? I know you sort of just did that, but if there's anything we missed, and then what do you think makes somebody successful in an AI role or an AI company if they don't have a research background? Again, we sort of covered these. It's just if anything comes to mind. Otherwise, I think we can wrap. I think we got you had some good like stuff in here. I definitely need to take the transcript and like pull out the quotes, because I
feel like I
So
thought I just
no,
word
no, no.
vomited.
Some emoji support if you're like really, or write in the chat if this was really helpful conversation for you. I think it was like really, really great. But if anything else comes to mind on those two, let us know. Otherwise, this has been awesome.
What do you think? I think I think another thing is that because the AI field is moving so fast, you do kind of have to keep up with the news a little bit on like we have an EDU channel where we're just constantly posting like, oh, there's this new tool we found, blah, blah. A lot of them come from YC early stages, YC companies, because most of their batch right now is AI. I think like 70% is an AI company. So like a lot, and that's another thing with working with an AI because it's so new. A lot of the services you integrate with is also so new that there's going to be some instability from that. Like we've most definitely worked with vendors that we just had to ditch down the line because they just were not able to be performant enough for what we wanted, or their documentation was god awful. I had no idea how to implement it. I'm trying to read their source code. Like, so there's a level of kind of you're working in a very cutting edge new space, and there's not everything is going to be documented for you. So I think you just gotta be okay with uncertainty for a founding engineer and AI engineer.
Love it. This has been really awesome. Thank you again so much for everything. I'll just like put your handle in the Slack in case people want to ask you any other questions. But thank you for volunteering and sharing. And I think we got a good video out of this. I know it feels like you're blabbing, but you totally weren't. I think you like covered really important stuff that's a gap information wise for us. Oh yeah, there you go. That's that. That's
Yeah, I mean, happy to answer any questions async. So just feel free to ping me
awesome.
in the Leopard channel. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.